Awesome. Okay, so yeah, we're going to be going over vulnerability scanning fundamentals today. This is the first class in this series. So yeah, about me, I'm Houston Herrera. I have been in cybersecurity for about 10 years now. I got into it through the Navy, the Department of Defense. I was a paramedic beforehand, so I didn't know anything about really computers, and then the Navy shoved me into it. And yeah, I worked as a like crypto network analyst for them, and I got sent to all kinds of different places through them. I went up to Fort Meade and I worked up there with the NSA, which was a wild time up there. And then they sent me down here to Pensacola, and I did some other, work down here. And then I got out after about 8 years, and then I have worked. So, oh yeah, so I've done like 4 years with teaching with the Department of Defense there. So. And then on top of that, I've got my bachelor's degree in cybersecurity and information assurance, and then uh, so like a ton of certs there. Basically, almost every CompTIA cert that they have, I've gotten a bunch of other ones, and I'm working on a SOC analyst one right now, and CISSP and all this other stuff. So, yeah, ton of stuff. I enjoy this job in this field. And then just uh, besides that, I do a bunch of just tech stuff on the side too. I make like servers and like home lab stuff. I like to play around with, and I just started brewing some cider last night. So it's fermenting. If you hear like a bubble pop up in the background, that's what that was. This little boop. Um, so yeah. Any questions about me or anything before we go over the agenda? No. Okay, great.
One
Uh,
No
question.
sure.
questions.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, so I'm planning on taking my Sec Plus exam. I'm still studying for it,
Awesome.
but I do have some I have a little bit of security knowledge because I used to do information access management security for a little bit.
Okay.
But you did say that you went from being like a paramedic to
Hmm.
cybersecurity. So
Yeah.
like I guess how was it easy doing the Sec Plus while you were still new to it?
So I didn't hop right into Sec Plus. One of the weird things about me was the military kind of just did all my training for me. And like I said, I got thrown into like Fort Meade immediately after my like initial training down here, which was like an intense like 8 month course that I went through where it was like 8 hours a day, like just a ton of training. It was really high pressure. And then I got up there and they immediately started like making me get all these qualifications and everything. So I was so burnt out like while I was going through that whole pipeline that I didn't get any certs basically until I was out of the military. They had kind of ruined the fun of it for me. And so I got Sec Plus afterwards. And I didn't have a lot of problems with it, just because I had a lot of background at that point. The one thing that I would say in Sec Plus that was difficult for me was the encryption stuff. I did know a lot about encryption, but they were asking a lot of specifics about, like key sizes and those type of things that those were things that I had to actually like flashcard through. But when it comes to this course right here, we're going to talk about like Nmap and some other scanning tools and stuff that are covered in Sec Plus, and they do expect you to like remember some of those. I had quite a bit of Nmap questions I remember on my Sec Plus exam. So yeah, I didn't think it was too bad, but I mean it's common for people to fail that one the first time. I hear it too. I got pretty lucky, I guess, and did pretty well on that. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Great. Um, all right, so let's talk about the agenda for this course. So it's going to change right now. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is like the five W's. So who, what, where, when, and why. And then it might change a little bit with these other ones. I think we're going to just get into tools almost immediately after we're done with this. So we'll talk about like living off the land tools, which is tools that exist already on the operating system of choice. So that could be either Windows or Linux. And so we'll talk about a bunch of those scanning tools that are already there. And then additional ones like Nmap, which are on like basically every Linux device has Nmap on it, but Windows doesn't, but it can be easily added to that. And then a bunch of other like specialty tools like Nessus and ones for scanning like cloud security and all those kinds of. There's a ton of different scanning tools that exist out there. So yeah, today and then with like so it'll this might change. This like I said, this is the first course, so the timing might be a little off on these. So yeah, each of these they were 2 hours. It was going to be 4 weeks, so I'm not sure how that's going to flush out here. But yeah, we'll record them. So we're going to go into a whole bunch of topics about vulnerability scanning, distinguishing it from pen testing, all of that. So we'll talk about where I'm going to look at this from a defensive and offensive perspective because both sides of the coin leverage vulnerability scanning heavily. It is a crucial part of just being in cybersecurity. No matter what you do, you are going to run into vulnerability scanning at some point. So understanding like what perspective you're looking at it from. And so I'm going to try and come at this entire course really from that, like whether you're a red team, blue team, or like an attacker or something like that, like how you would think about doing vulnerability scanning. So we'll talk about a whole bunch of tools, all that. This is discussion driven, right? That's the best part about, the courses like this is you guys can ask questions. I'll ask you guys questions, make sure you're like, you're tracking what's going on, right? So please ask questions. If you guys, if I say anything that you don't understand, or I use an acronym that you guys didn't understand or something, feel free to raise your hand or chime in at any point. If you interrupt me, I'm not going to be right. That's totally fine. So the whole goal is for you guys to be able to leave here and actually run some scans and look at those scans and identify them and find vulnerabilities and understand what those vulnerabilities are and right maybe be able to leverage those into exploits or figure out how to patch them or something, right? That's the whole goal of this. Any questions about any of that? No? All right, cool.
No
So
questions.
all right, so week one, the 5 Ws: who, what, where, when, and why of vulnerability scanning. So this with week one objective, we're just going to go over those, right? Those 5 Ws. So like, what is vulnerability scanning? Why would we do vulnerability scanning? Who does vulnerability scanning, right? And like, when and where do you do it? These are all really important to understand about this. And then we'll go over some guardrails of vulnerability scanning because it's not a benign thing to do, right? We can get in trouble doing this kind of stuff. You can end up, getting fired or getting, thrown in jail, depending on like, if you're not careful doing this kind of stuff. So we'll talk about that as well. All right, so some key terminology to go over. So first of all, vulnerability, right? Pretty obvious. A vulnerability is going to be a weakness in a system that could potentially be exploited. And that's what we're going to be trying to find with these scans is just some type of misconfiguration or maybe just like a flaw in some code or an application or something that can lend itself to being taken advantage of in some kind of way that we don't want it to, or that we do want it to, right? If we're an attacker, right, that's what we're looking for to try and break into a system. So vulnerability, right? That's what this whole scanning thing is about here, right? And a scan is a broad term, right? It's basically anything where we can take something over a network and then try and retrieve information from some other device that we are not on, right? And there are a multitude of different tools that we can use for scanners. Some of these are going to be automated tools where you just kind of click a button and it just launches a whole host of crazy scans against a device, and then it comes back with a nice, neat little report for you. And then other ones are going to be like manual tools where we can be very precise with what we do, where we just need like one little bit of information, right? And we can just send one little thing. And both of these are really good and important to know, right? The automated tools are great, but they can also be a weakness if you rely on those too much and you don't know how to use manual tools to get scans. Okay, so Next, pen test and red team. So this is a like the attacker perspective, but a legal one, right? This is legal exploitation. So you're still trying to help somebody out while doing this, right? This is not like a black hat or attacker or a nation state or advanced persistent threat, as we call those a lot of times, APT. If you hear that, those people, they're attacking without any type of authority to do that. So in pen testing or red teaming, that's where we have an actual agreement that we can do that. And vulnerability scanning is going to be part of red teaming slash pen testing. Right, you're going to be doing that. Same thing with blue team. Right, blue team is the other side of that coin. That is like the SOC analysts and stuff, right? They might be doing assessments to on the inside of the network coming from the protected side. They're going to be doing vulnerability scans to make sure that their network is safe, right? And then these are just some like common terms like threat is going to be like how much potential harm could be caused by what we're doing or the vulnerability itself. The risk is how likely that vulnerability can be taken advantage of. Like, so we could have something that's very vulnerable, but like a high vulnerability, like a high risk threat to it, but the odds of them actually exploiting that vulnerability are very low because maybe they have to be like right next to it with a laptop or something, right? Or Wi-Fi within Wi-Fi distance. So that's where the risk comes in with this. And then exposure is like the accessibility to the vulnerability. Okay, like so how exposed are we with this? All right. And so like I said, ask questions if you guys have anything. I have a quick story about this. Like I was telling you guys, like when at first I was at the NSA. When I got there, immediately after leaving the program, they gave me a mentor, which was fantastic, and he was the smartest guy. I have ever known, probably to this day. He was one of the people were like, "Oh yeah, that guy, he's a galaxy brain." Like that's like that meme where the guy goes, "Whoa," and like his head explodes. That's what it was like talking to this guy. He was incredibly smart. Um, but because he was smart did not mean that he was a good mentor, unfortunately, which is people were like, "Oh, that's awesome. You have him as your mentor. That guy's crazy smart." I was like, "Yeah, I don't understand what he's saying though." Like that was a huge problem with him was he was so smart he did not know how to like teach me, right? Like to like teach down to me. So he would talk in just acronyms and uh I would ask him some questions but he would kind of like just look at me like, "What? You don't know that? You don't know what I'm saying?" And so I felt dumb all the time, like talking to this guy. So I kind of stopped asking him questions a lot and just tried to watch what he did and learn. And yeah, that really hindered me a lot because I was embarrassed about like not being at his level, which is was stupid on my part. Like just not knowing something, you should ask questions, right? Like who cares if the person that you're talking to uh that most people in this industry are very nice, right? Unless you're rude about it. So just always ask questions in this career field. There's always going to be someone in the room that's usually smarter or knows more or something about it than you. So, just yeah, try and take that away. Ask as many questions as you possibly can. So what is vulnerability scanning? All right, so this is going to be using some type of automated or manual tool like we talked about to try and identify these weaknesses. And so this is a crucial thing that's used by, like I said, attackers, defenders, everybody is going to use vulnerability scanning to try and figure out these vulnerabilities that exist. This is how attackers gain access into a network, right? In order for them to find out how they're going to break in, they need to be able to find these vulnerabilities. And scanning is the major way that we do that. Sometimes they just throw them out there and see what happens, but if you're trying to be very precise in what you do, you need to have this knowledge of what gaps might exist in there. And vice versa, same thing with the defense people, right? They need to know what kind of vulnerabilities that they have so they can help protect against it. And these scans, right? What are we looking for with these scans? So there's a couple different things. Signatures is one of them. These are like known vulnerabilities that exist, and they've taken a snippet of code and been able to identify the vulnerability based on that snippet or hash value or something, and then we could know that there's a vulnerability based on those what they call signatures. And then whenever vulnerability is exposed and it's known about by the security community, they give it this CVE number, this common vulnerability and exposures number that we can identify it easily with. So sometimes a scan will give us a CVE number, and you can use that to look up what that vulnerability is and then all the stuff about it, like what the exposure is, what the risk, all that kind of stuff. They do a lot of write-ups on that. And then heuristics. That's like how a vulnerability might act, or how someone taking advantage of a vulnerability might act, or some kind of misconfiguration or something like that. So heuristics is kind of a general term for like actions, like identifying a vulnerability through actions. Okay. And then what what is vulnerability scanning not? It's not exploitation, right? This is the step prior to exploitation. So right beforehand, right? This is how we understand what vulnerabilities we can exploit. So scanning should not cause any type of like exploitation, but it can cause denial of service if we're too overzealous with our scans. We can actually cause some unwanted effects with it. So it's not exploitation, but it's not completely harmless, right? We can cause uh, so so yeah. It's also not a full risk assessment. This is just part of a risk assessment. Okay. Any questions about that? Tracking? I got you guys.
Tracking.
Okay.
Tracking.
Awesome. All right. Next, let's talk about some different scanning methodologies here. Like, so how we're actually going to utilize these scans against our targets. So first is active versus passive scanning. So active scanning is going to be what we do 99% of the time, right? That is where we're going to be using some type of tool to send network packets across the network at a target, and we're going to bounce information off that target back to us, and it's going to tell us what is going on with that target, what vulnerabilities might exist on that target, what ports are open, what services are running on there, that kind of stuff, right? And then passive scanning is more like is sitting there listening, right? So if it's passive, we're not actually sending anything at the target. So what we're going to be doing is looking at other people communicating with the target. So other people that are sending out stuff to the target, and then we're sitting there listening to that communication, and then looking at the communication and seeing if we can identify any vulnerabilities in that communication that we're seeing. That way is not as effective, right? The active way is much more effective for finding vulnerabilities because we can control what information we're sending at the target, what information we're getting back. The major downside to the active scanning is that if we're trying to not get discovered by the target, which if we're, red team or an attacker or something like that, the active scanning can give us away, right? It can alert our target that we are trying to find out vulnerabilities about their system. So active scanning for a red team or for like an attacker needs to be done with some kind of tact, right? Or tradecraft, we call it, to where we try not to alert the adversary that we are trying to find out information about them. Okay. Where when you're doing it defensively or passively, right? That's not really as much of a concern because you're just sitting there quiet, like sucking up information, but that information might not be quite enough. Okay. Um, so next, dynamic scanning. This is where you are going to change your scans based upon the landscape. Okay, this is where the difference between a somebody who just uses an automated scanning tool like Nessus or something like that, and just kind of aims it at a target and fires away and gets this huge amount of information back. That tool can actually be dangerous, right? Because it might cause disruptions in the network from using massive scanning like that. So some scanners can identify, you can set them up so that they will cause minimal disruption in the network so that they can respond dynamically. But more so this would be like more manual scanning, right? Like understanding your target's landscape and then changing your scans based upon that landscape so that you're not just sending out tons of data into the network and making a lot of noise and identifying yourself or causing harm to that network. So dynamic scanning is something that we're always going to really want to utilize, especially from an attacking perspective. And then agent versus agentless. So this is where we are going to deploy agents. This is going to be more defensively done. So like if you were in a SOC, right, or a blue team, something like that, right, you're going to have access to all these agents that you put on all of your endpoints and your servers and containers and cloud components and all that stuff. And what an agent is just like a small program, lightweight program that you put on the system, and that program can do all kinds of stuff for you, right? Like it can collect data on that device itself. It can even send out scans into that area of the network that it's at and collect that data for you and then send it back to wherever you are. So agents are awesome, but they're really something that you're only going to have access to if you're working in that defensive role, right? If you're a pen tester or like an attacker, you are not going to have access to like the agents on, you might be able to see some of the data that they're passing back and forth if it's not encrypted, but other than that, yeah. So agents are awesome, and they're a huge tool for defensive people to be able to gain like a ton of stuff. So have you guys heard of what like an EDR, endpoint detection and response, like the or SIEMs, right? Those have agents associated with them that you can pull this kind of information from. Uh, Okay. And then lastly, authenticated versus unauthenticated scans. All right. So when you're sending out vulnerability scans at your target, you can add credentials to allow those scans to have more access into all kinds of different stuff. So tons of different things will not give you any information unless you have credentials. A lot of different services won't. So in some of the scans, you can put in those credentials into the scanner to give you more access in there. This is going to be something that defensive people are going to have access to, right? They're going to have access to those creds. They need to make sure they're careful with the creds, that they're not exposing them while doing these scans. But attackers are most likely not going to have these credentials to be able to do these authorized scans. So uh, they're awesome if you can do it. It gives you a lot more insight to more vulnerabilities that can exist if you have authorized scans versus unauthorized. The other downside is that the unauthorized scans, right, you might be trying to brute force an authorization by doing that, and you can end up finding creds or causing a denial of service while doing that also. Any questions about any of these different scanning methodologies that we're going through?
I had I guess one or two.
Sure.
One is, what is a trade craft? I
Oh,
think you
sure.
said, for
Yeah.
active passive scanning.
Okay, yeah. So tradecraft, have you ever heard of TTPs? So like tactics, techniques, procedures. So tradecraft is what operators use to, it's kind of like a playbook almost that they use, that is going to lead them in the right direction. And so when we're talking about like a an attacker or like a red team person, when they're using tradecraft to try and get into a network, they're going to try and do it as stealthy as possible. So they're going to try and not be detected. So something like using if they were to use like automated scanning tool that's scanning for like every known vulnerability and scanning for every type of service or port that might be open, that tool would be incredibly loud, right? And let's say they try and run that as fast as possible. What they would do is blast that network with a ton of network traffic, right? And then the defensive analyst would easily identify them, right? They would say, "Hey, there's a huge attack being launched, a huge like, right, vulnerability scan being launched against us right now. All of our systems are picking this up." And so they would identify that attacker immediately. That would be bad tradecraft. That would be terrible tradecraft on that attacker's part, right? Where good tradecraft would be where they would try and like minimize that scan. Maybe they would slow it way down. So, they're sending some scans every once in a while, very slowly, and then they slip through the detection mechanisms that defensive right network has, so that they might not be able to identify them at all. So that's when I talk about tradecraft, that's what I'm talking about, is basically doing things um, in a thoughtful manner to try and avoid detection. Does that help?
So it's like a organized method of attacking,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when you're talking about attacking too, it really the way that we attack a network is very similar to like how, a SEAL team or something would attack, like Osama bin Laden's compound or something. The tactics are they're very closely aligned, like how you would do investigating beforehand, right? You would investigate your target, then you would try and find out like where the weaknesses are, right? That's what we're doing with vulnerability scanning, right? We're trying to find out where the weaknesses is in this compound and where our entry points are, where we can get in that is like the least threat to us, right? So that's why like operators and stuff like that, they use those terms of like tradecraft in the same way that we do. It's kind of there's a lot of similarities between those two. Does that help? Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
cool.
And then I
And
had sorry, before you continue, I had
no,
another
no, go ahead.
question
Yeah, of course.
about the agents. So is
Yeah.
this the agent is essentially like a like a proxy
Mm.
type of entity that is used?
Yeah, yeah, they're like your own little guy that's out there that's gathering information for you, right? So like you can have a certain spot where you sit back in the network like on a protected device, right? And then these agents, you can deploy them out into the network and then they can gather information for you and send it back to you at any point. So they're used widely nowadays because of that, because of how big networks can be nowadays, and because of how like fast they can respond to stuff. So you can set them up in tons of different ways. You can have them like periodically send stuff back to you. You can have triggered events. So like if something happens, right? They will send alerts to you or send logs back to you or send scanning results and all this kind of stuff. So agents are awesome, and they really don't require that much computing resources. The only thing is that they need to work on that system. So like some legacy systems, like older systems might not, be compatible with a lot of different agents. Where like newer systems and stuff like most people who make these things, they're going to make it so that they work with everything: Windows, Linux, servers. There's a ton of different stuff, like CrowdStrike, if you've ever heard of them. They're like a huge EDR thing. They have agents that work on like almost anything you can possibly think of. They have a little lightweight agent that they can put on stuff that will send back information to
Yeah,
you.
I had to deal with CrowdStrike at my company.
Yeah, yeah, they're huge. They're huge in the cybersecurity world now. Um,
But what's the difference between an agent and like let's say a virus?
oh, uh, Good question. The agent is working for the network themselves, right? Like the defender. So agents are a good thing, right? They're something that you want to have on your system. They collect information and send it back, right? So there could be some privacy concerns with an agent, right? Like what kind of collect stuff are they collecting? Hopefully they're not collecting any type of personal information from you while you're using that. But other than
Mhm.
that, they really don't have a downside to them, I don't think, to you using them in the network, where a virus is being used by someone that's not in your network, right? By someone that's not in the company or not by you, right? The virus is being used by an attacker to gain some type of, leverage against you in a way that you're not going to like, right? Or stealing your information or gaining access to your system or something, right?
But
Viruses could
they're basically the same thing, but just on two different sides.
they can be so a virus can have a lot of different ways that it works. It could do something like that, right? A virus could pull information, but yeah, a virus is going to be some type of program also that is on the system that is going to be unintended. You don't want that thing there, where you do want an agent there, and an agent can actually detect a virus potentially on there. Something like a some agents can act like antiviruses on the device, where they scan for malware or for something like a virus that's on the device and identify that.
Hmm.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, great. Any other questions about this? No? Awesome. All right. Well, let's if you think of anything, let me know, right? Okay. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so why? Why are we doing this? Why are we scanning? Why are we using vulnerability scans? Um, we are going to be doing this to reduce the likelihood of impact, right, into our network. So if you are blue team or red team, right, if you are hired by a company or the government or whatever to do these scans against the network, it is going to be to reduce impact, to reduce the chance of somebody leveraging a vulnerability against the network that you're on. So if you're an attacker, however, you are going to be using vulnerability scans to identify a vulnerability so that you can get into the network, right? So that you could actually breach the network. So there's the couple different reasons, right? Right, just right there why you would do it. But mainly it's to either reduce impact, right? If you're doing it from the good side, right, the white hat side, and if you're doing it from the black hat side, it would be to leverage a vulnerability. Another reason that we do vulnerability scans that you might not think is to validate that our patches worked. So if we scan and we identify that there is a vulnerability in the network, we want to fix that, right? If we're coming from the blue team side, right, where we identify that, oh no, we have a vulnerability in our network, we can then go about patching that vulnerability, doing like a system update or some type of mitigating effect, like putting up firewall rules or something around it to stop traffic to that if we don't have a patch. And then afterwards, we would want to scan to verify that we can no longer see that vulnerability. So if an attacker was to scan our network, they wouldn't see that vulnerability either. So that the patch actually worked or whatever type of thing that we did before there. So you would use it as a baseline and then to confirm afterwards. So you scan, you end up doing a lot of scans, more than you probably think you would end up doing vulnerability scans. Um, so you can actually use vulnerability scans to find an attacker in the network as well. Uh, Now, why? How would you find an attacker in the network? Well, when attackers they gain a foothold in the system, sometimes they will open up services on a device, right? Or they might start sending out network traffic or open up a weird port or something like that. So if you've before done your security baseline scans as a defender, scanning your network and finding out what type of services you have available. Let's say you do another scan again, and then, hey, there's this new service that opened up on a device that doesn't look like a service that you know about before. Huh, that's odd. Let me look into that service that just opened up. I wonder if somebody, right, maybe legitimately opened up a new service, or in this case, right, maybe it could be an attacker that is hosting some type of backdoor that they put on the device, right? So scanning can help us actually identify intruders that have gained a foothold inside the network itself. Uh, and then increase pre-release confidence. So before a company does a release of some kind of application or a new system that they bought or a new fancy firewall or something, right, that they're going to put into the network, it's a good idea to scan it beforehand to see if there's any type of vulnerabilities that pop up on that system before you actually throw it out into the wild and release potentially your network to some type of vulnerability. And then compliance and audits. So there's a GRC class that's being taught here. Are you guys taking that class or sat in on that one?
I
No.
have
Oh, okay. Yeah.
um
So that one's going to go over all of this kind of stuff, right? Like so compliance and audits, the huge part of businesses nowadays is that they need to know, right, that if there is a vulnerability or anything, it's required. There's a lot of certificates and different things that companies have to do to be able to get revenue and be able to operate in certain things, to be able to have to handle credit card data, to be able to handle like HIPAA, like people's medical information. And so they have to be compliant to be able to do that kind of stuff. And so we have to do vulnerability scanning as part of those compliance checks. So that's going to be something that we need to do with that. And then gathering metrics as well. So this is going to be for being able to prove stuff like evidence in case there's some kind of uh, like legal thing that we have to do if there's a legal investigation. So we might have metrics for that. The other thing is the C-suite. So the people that run the companies that we're doing, right? And so if you're working for a company, they're going to want to know metrics about what's going on. Like how vulnerable are we? How many vulnerabilities have we had? How many have we patched and all that stuff? So doing scanning is going to give us a lot of these metrics, which is also job security because the higher ups, they always want to cut cybersecurity, right? It doesn't make them money really. So they want to cut that if they can. So if you can show them all these metrics of look how many vulnerabilities like that just keep popping up in the network that we have to fix all the time, they go, oh, okay. All right, I guess we'll keep you around. We'll keep paying you guys. So metrics are a really good thing for us in this field. Any questions about any of that? Sorry, I skipped ahead. Any of that stuff that I went over?
I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
I'm good too.
Awesome. That means I explained it very well, I feel. All right. So how are we doing on time? All right, we're at 45, so we got 15 more minutes. How are you guys doing? All right, you want me to keep going or?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, awesome.
I'm enjoying it.
Oh, awesome. Good to hear. All right, so why scan? All right, so we're still on the why part right here. So the compliance and the audits part. All right, so here are some other things that I talked about. So PCIe, DSS, this is the credit card stuff, right? So if you hold credit card information, we would need to scan for certain reasons for that. HIPAA, ISO 2701, that's a very widely, like globally recognized like security certification thing that you can go through to make sure that you're compliant with all these security standards. Vulnerability scan is going to be part of that as well. So evidence and scope, like I talked about. So scans help, but they're not everything. There's going to be other stuff in doing all this that are going to come into play, like encryption and all kinds of other weird stuff. Document scope, so documenting, like I talked about, versions, timestamps. So every time we scan and do all this, we're going to create a ton of records from doing this, right? And this is going to be if you're doing red team or blue team, you are going to keep track of all of this stuff, and you are going to make a chart at the end of it and a big timeline and a big report that you're going to give at the end, especially if you're red team, you're going to be showing all this stuff to them and what you did and what scans you did and where they're vulnerable and all that. And then meantime to this is meantime to response. Yeah, so scans can help us find out if something is broken, right? And then service level agreement, that's where if you're contractually obligated to fix something, scans can help us like figure out if stuff is broken too, or if we need to fix something. So they can be really important for that. And then gathering metrics, like we already talked about. All right. So we're still on the why here. So coverage percentage. So assets, crown jewels. Crown jewels is just like the things in the network that we have that are super important. Like if that thing goes down, the company's not making money anymore, right? So things like that, like their payment processing server or something, or their website or whatever, those things are going to be super important, and they are going to be scanned at a much higher rate than other things in the network would, because they're so important. We need to know if those things are vulnerable or if they're going to go down at any point. Okay. So a risk burn down chart, that's something that's going to show like trends over time. So it's going to be like a little graph like this. It's something that you would show to like the C-suite executives, right? Like, hey, look, we're getting rid of vulnerabilities, right? There's some examples down here of like stuff that you would say to them. Known exploited vulnerabilities exposure level. So what this means is that there's a vulnerability that has come out, right? It has a CVE number associated with it. So that means that the security community knows about this exploit, right? That has come out against a target. And there has been discovery that people are actively taking advantage of this exploit out in the wild. So this is particularly dangerous to a company or the government or whatever, right? If you have these known exploited vulnerabilities in your network, like so something popped up and then you find out that you have that in your network and other people are being exploited in the wild by this right now, that's a huge problem that we have. And so this is one of those metrics that you want to be aware of. because it requires immediate action on something like that, right? We either need to patch this thing immediately or find some way to stop attackers from being able to reach out and touch this thing, right? Like what we would call mitigating at that point. Okay. Any questions about any of that?
No.
All right.
No questions.
Cool. So next, now we're on where. So where to scan. All right. So where are we going to be doing these scans from? So there's a couple different locations that we can do them. External, so outside the network, right? Outside of our company's network or wherever, right? So we're going to be doing this from the internet most likely at this point. And so this is going to be from public IPs. It could be from like a cloud server. If you're an attacker, you can use something like a what we call a redirector or a pivot or something. So this you'd be doing these scans from like some other device that you've taken over at this point, right? Or some other device that is not associated with you, right? You would never want to do any of these scans at the target if you were an attacker from your normal device, right? Like from your own home IP address, right? You would want to use something like the Tor network that bounces your IP around the globe, or a VPN, or something like that to hide your IP, right? So those are the external places where you would actually be doing the scan against the network. And so this is going to be identifying things that are exposed from that network to the internet. So you're not going to see that much from an external scanning point, right? You shouldn't, as long as the network has done a good job and with firewalls and all this other stuff of protecting themselves, you should not see a lot out there. And everything that pops up in there is going to be like, exposed to the internet, which is a dangerous place to be exposed. Cloud stuff. Next, internal. So inside the network. Okay. So defensive analysts are going to have access to this where they're going to be able to scan basically their entire network, everything, right? They're going to have credentials to be able to get past stuff. So, like a blue team is going to have access to scan inside the network and scan everything, which is fantastic for them to be able to find out vulnerabilities. But also, attackers will scan internally too once they gain access into the target networks that they're going after, right? So after they breach into the network, they find a vulnerability from their external scan and they gain access to a foothold inside the network. Now, when they're inside the network, they can see more stuff inside there. So that's when they'll start launching internal scans inside the network to find more devices that might be vulnerable so that they can move around throughout the network and then infect more devices, right? Find whatever information they're looking for in there. So scanning externally and internally is a good skill to know for an attacker or for red team or something like that. And then being able to identify that from blue team too, if you see a device that you have inside your network that's doing scans inside your network that normally doesn't do one of those, it doesn't have an agent on it or anything like that, right? That might tip you off that, hey, that device has been compromised by somebody who's trying to gain more access into our network, right? So a lot of different places these scans can come from. Cloud stuff, SaaS, right? Security, um, endpoints, containers, so like Kubernetes, Docker stuff, right? You can scan those as well. There's a bunch of different tools that we have to be able to scan these things. Websites, right? Websites can be scanned as well. So almost anything that is exposed, any type of application, there are some type of scanners that can look at those specific things and look for vulnerabilities in them. Okay. So a ton of different stuff out there. And then third party stuff. So nowadays, it, things are complicated in networks, right? The modern network and the modern company is a complicated mess of services and other things that exist out there. Back in the day, right, defensive people and attackers had a lot more simple. You would own a company and you would buy your server rack and you would have all of your stuff. You would have your website and your firewall and all your stuff on premises, right? And it would just be this one little contained neat thing that was there. And that made it simple for defensive people to know what was going on because everything was really self-contained. It also made it easy for attackers because once they gained access into that network, everything was right there, right? So it was easy for them to get access to almost everything inside the network. Nowadays, we use all these different services that are out there. So a company can be split up into, hundreds of different things all around the globe. So knowing that makes it harder for both people. It makes it harder for people to defend that because you're so spread out. You need to make sure that you're scanning all of these things for vulnerabilities, right? It makes it harder for the attacker too because they have to scan all these different things. They have to find out about all these different things and then scan all of those different things to try and find vulnerabilities. So thinking about third-party stuff that the your target is using or your company is using is super important. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Like where we're going to be scanning from?
No, I'm all set.
No.
No, good. Awesome. All right, we got about 5 more minutes. So yeah, we can get through another slide, I think. All right. So when to scan. So the cadence. The cadence is important. This is going to be how often you scan. All right, as an attacker, you're going to scan whenever you want to, really. Uh, well, let's think about it. Okay, guys. So here's a question from you. If you're an attacker and you're outside the network, right, and you're trying to figure out when do you want to do your vulnerability scan at the network? Do you want to do it in the middle of the day when everyone's there and everyone's busy and they're working, or would you want to do it at night when nobody's there and it's kind of quiet on the network? What do you think? Any ideas?
At night.
At
At
night?
night when there's no one there.
Yeah, and that answer that you gave is what I thought when I first started doing this, and it's what almost everybody that I've taught thinks, right? It seems like yeah, that's when you would break in at night, right? If you were to break into a building, it always shows the guys sneaking in at nighttime. But it's counterintuitive in this case. When we want to do these scans, actually, for an attacker, is when there's a lot of network traffic. And the reason for that is you want to blend in with everybody else that's scanning. So the likelihood that your scans will get caught during that time is lower because there's so much traffic. So they have these things in the network that are called IDSs. They're intrusion detection systems, and they can identify when people are doing vulnerability scans. But if there's a ton of traffic going on in the network, it makes it a lot harder for these IDSs and for AI and for defensive analysts to be able to correlate all of those scans back to one target if the network is really busy at that time, right? If there's a lot of noise going on, and if you do it very slowly. If you send one packet and then sit there for a while, send another packet, then sit there for a while. It's going to take a while, but it makes it a lot harder for the AI to be able to correlate those scans all together. Where if you were to do it at nighttime when it's really quiet, right, and you were to send a ton of scans all at the same time, right, that would be really loud, and it would be there's no other traffic there to distract anyone else from seeing it, so it would look really odd at that time. So it makes it a lot louder. So for an attacker, they want to do it generally when there's a lot of stuff going on. Okay, does that make sense?
It
Yeah.
does. I didn't
Okay.
even think about it like that,
Yeah,
but
right.
it makes sense.
It's counterintuitive. Yeah, but yeah, you want to blend in. You want to disguise yourself. Um, And then if we're talking about blue team now, like so you're part of the defensive, right? So how often are you going to be doing scanning as a defensive person? Which is it's going to be a lot, okay? And it's going to depend based on your network and how your network is set up and what your needs are, right? What kind of compliance stuff that you have. But these are going to be just some general times that we have here. Okay, so externally, you're going to do like a quick scan maybe once a week, right? And then a full, like detailed network scan once a month. The crown jewels, the major things that you have in your network, you would want to scan those weekly. Do a full scan on those every week. Make sure that those things are nice and safe and that they are not vulnerable. Okay. And then internally, right, the core of the network that you have, you're going to do a full audit monthly, a full scan of everything, authenticated scan, right? You're going to do these scans generally at night. So why would you want to do the internal, like big full scans, do you think, at night? Any idea? from the blue team perspective inside.
Less traffic.
Yeah, there's less traffic at that time, which is good because these scans can actually be very intrusive, and they could be intrusive on like the different devices that you're going after, and they can take up a lot of network traffic also at the same time. So doing these scans can potentially cause a denial of service, and they can also potentially bog down network traffic at the same time. So you would want to do these scans at night when no one's there in, right? Because you're allowed to do them, and you don't care if you're a defensive analyst if they stick out, right? If someone knows that you're doing the scans at that time, you're not worried about getting caught because what you're doing is legal, right? You're trying to do it for the right reasons. So yeah, you would want to do these at night. Endpoints, right? So like the actual devices themselves, you would want to scan those daily or weekly if you have agents on board, right? So the agents, like those things that we were talking about for the IDSs and for the EDRs, right? Daily, you can pull stuff from those. Those things are lightweight. They should be collecting logs all the time, and then a full one monthly. And then cloud stuff. Now, cloud is a whole different game where you're going to be using these APIs that are built into the cloud that does these scans for you out there. Cloud is a mixed bag. It's awesome in some ways, and in some ways it's not. It's expensive. That's the way that it's really not. But cloud services do come with a lot of baked-in security tools. So when you set up the scans for them, you can have them scan themselves and send you like reports like all the time based on that. So, and then you can, right, pay people to mitigate that or whatever. You could pay your way out of everything with cloud. But yeah, you can get scans from those, and those are either continuously or going to be weekly. And so you need to be aligned with your ops team. So once again, from the blue team side of this, right? If you're going to be doing these big crazy scans that could potentially impact stuff, you might want to do deconfliction with these people, right? Make sure that you are not going to cause any interruption in the network, or that they're not changing stuff out or doing anything weird in the network when you're doing these scans. So align with the parts of your company that are going to be doing stuff to make sure that you're not causing any issues, and that, if they change stuff, that there's something new that changed in the network. If not, then we start to call that stuff shadow IT, where things that exist in the network that people don't know about, right? So it's important to know about those kind of things as well. All right, it looks like we're at that hour point. Do you got any questions for you guys? Anything?
I have a few.
Sure.
Um, so hmm, I guess one out of curiosity, when it comes to agents,
Hmm.
do they have their own like protection when they are out in the network?
So agents are going to be installed on a operating system themselves, right? So they're a small lightweight program that's put on an operating system. So they will have the protection of the network. They'll have the protection of that operating system themselves. And then depending on what type of agent they are, like if they're something like an endpoint detection and response agent, something like that, where they're pretty much an antivirus themselves, they're deeply embedded into the operating system. So they can be very well protected by like the kernel of the operating system itself. They can see all kinds of things and send out alerts. So yeah, depending on what type of agent it is, they're very hard to stop, because sometimes attackers want to disable those things if they possibly can, or try and hide from those things, because a lot of the times the whole goal of those things is to find vulnerabilities and to find attackers, right? And to make sure that everything works properly. So they do try and protect those things as much as possible and make sure that they can't be tampered with, right? And if that they are tampered with, that there's some kind of alert that's sent out for those things.
Hmm. And I guess getting into that, how can you make or use software for your own agents? Like, let's say if you want to get into that,
Hmm.
but you're like not part of an organization that already has them, is there a way to, I guess, start working on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there are SIEM devices that are out there, SIEM, which is Security Information and Event Managers, and they are a tool that gathers logs, right, in your network. And there are a multitude of free ones that are out there. Man, I cannot think of the one off the top of my head. It starts with a W. But if you look up like open source seams, those are things that are going to have agents. And so what you would have is you would have a server somewhere. You could have like a lightweight server, or it could be on your desktop or whatever, right? And then what you could do is go and deploy those agents to all your different things in your house. And then what it will do, once you configure it, those agents will send back information to you about anything that you want, right? Like, so if an event comes up or something, there's tons of different stuff. Oh, Danielle's throwing some stuff in there. Microsoft Sentinel, NetWise, yeah, NetWitness, yeah. So uh, yeah, these tools are great, and the information that they give you is pretty much what you want them to. Yeah, seam tools. Yeah, and then EDRs is another one. Endpoint detection and response tools that they utilize agents. And CrowdStrike, yeah, that one. I'm not sure. Yeah, Defender. I'm not sure if there's a free version of CloudStrike, and my camera turned off. Rapid7, another good one. Oh yeah.
Oh, that's a lot.
Cortex. Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of them out there. And there's like some really lightweight ones and like, free open source ones. So I imagine in um the the lab class that they're working on that they'll be doing some of those. Yeah, EDR tools. Yeah. Did
Okay.
my
And kind of piggybacking off of that, where you said you could kind of scan for your stuff at
hmm
home. Does that trigger anything? Like let's say your internet service provider, does that trigger anything on their end?
No, it shouldn't, because that's going to be inside your network. So the internet service provider, right, is going to be at your WAN entrance, right? So that's the entrance to the internet. And so as long as you deploy all that stuff like inside your network, like they should have no access to any of that stuff, or see any of that kind of stuff. Unless you like the only time that they would be able to potentially see any of that is if you put any of those agents on stuff that you had that was outside your network, right? Like if you had some kind of cloud service that you wanted to deploy one of these agents to, or something else in somebody else's network that you wanted to send information back to you, then it would cross them. But as long as you kept it like in an encrypted channel, they would have no way of seeing any of that information anyways. They would just see where it was coming from.
Okay. And I feel like I did have another question.
Sure.
Um, hmm, I think for right now, I lost it. But if I think of it
It's all right.
again, I'll see if I could bring it up before we end.
Sure.
I
Oh,
had a question.
yeah.
Is it normal for an organization or a company to have like multiple vulnerability scanning tools, just in case like if one goes down or like something is going on with one of them, there's other vulnerability scanning tools that they can use. Is,
Absolutely.
is that normal?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and the reason for that is not just because if one of them goes down, because I mean they're pretty reliable. They should be working most of the time, but there almost is like no one tool, one vulnerability scanning tool that is going to be a use case for all the potential vulnerabilities that are out there, right? Like so Nmap's great. Nmap can scan a ton of stuff, but Nmap can't scan what's going on inside of inside of a cloud server. It can't scan what's going on inside of a website. So some tools like Durbuster, right, are great for things like that, right? Where Durbuster is really good at scanning websites and doing all kinds of stuff with those, right? So they're going to have access to a bunch of different tools. Now there are big ones that do a lot of stuff, like Nessus or is huge, but yeah, and not only that, like a defensive analyst should know how to use, and an offensive analyst should know how to use a bunch of different types of tools out there. Oh, I think my camera just it said goodbye. But yeah, so yeah, there's a ton of different tools that will be at your disposal. And that, unfortunately or fortunately, how you want to look at it, that you might, need to learn how to use. Uh, and we'll go over quite a few of these in this course. Anything else? Any other questions you guys can think of?
No, I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Well, if you think of any, I think I'm still sharing the screen over here. There's my email that you can send me any questions to. And then in that case, I will see you guys next week where we will finish up where we left off and then get into some tools and some living off the land tools and maybe some Nmap if we got time. All right, sound good?
Sounds good.
Will that
Thank
be
you so
a more
much.
hands-on class, or would that just be watching you go into the tools?
So yeah, we could do both. I mean, if you're going through the the building your home lab tool and stuff, or if you have like Kali Linux or any of that